Ukraine have from this budget, and can we expect for the lethal weapon, or what are this money for?
Sure. Well, let me start by saying, first of all, it's important not to lose track of everything that was accomplished in 2015. And I think one of the nice things about this holiday period is it gave us a chance to sort of step back and think about where we are today compared to where you were 12 months ago, and everything that's been accomplished in terms of the IMF agreements, in terms of resisting Putin, defeating the Novorossiya project, strengthening your position militarily, moving ahead on reform. The budget deal on December 25th happened while all of us were having Western Christmas, but it was hugely important. A very big accomplishment for the President and for the government and for the Prime Minister, sending a signal that Ukraine is going to move forward. Our approach to assistance to Ukraine, both economic and military security sector, has been very clear. As long as you are able to demonstrate continued progress on reform, we will do our part to support Ukraine, to support the Ukrainian people as you seek to defend your sovereign territory. There's no question about that. The $300 million of security sector assistance, which is 2-year money, it can be spent over the course of 2 years, is a very important symbol of our continued commitment to support Ukraine's strengthening of your defensive capability. But it's only one piece of a much larger agenda of support that we have, including our loan guarantees, our economic support, our technical support, our diplomatic support. You asked specifically about the $300 million. That's something that we are developing jointly right now with the General Staff, with your military. Just before the holiday break, we had a meeting of the U.S.-Ukraine Joint Commission on Defense and Security, and we had some very good substantive conversations about what your priorities are, what your military priorities are for additional assistance. A lot of which is along the lines of things we've already been doing. Communications equipment, the training at Yavoriv is extremely important. I want us to be sure to continue that. Also, the enhancements that we've provided with things like radars, night vision, systems that allow your military to more effectively defend your territory. For now, we're not planning on lethal assistance, but frankly, Ukraine's capabilities are, in terms of producing your own lethal equipment, are much greater than they were even a year ago. I just shared with the team here over the weekend a very good analysis in English by somebody looking at Ugroberporn and all of the management improvements that are happening in that state enterprise. So we're going to keep working on these issues. You're going to move ahead, and we're going to move ahead.
Okay, about moving ahead. What have we done in 2015 that USA can say it was well done?
Yeah.
And what does the best or the USA expect from Ukraine in 2016? What key points?
Yeah, well, let me say, first of all, in terms of expectations, the most important ones are the expectations of the Ukrainian people themselves. And I think it's very clear as I talk to Ukrainians, they want the politicians, political leaders to stay together, to work together, to keep modernizing the state. In terms of 2015, the single most important reform accomplishment was continued compliance with the IMF agreement. Ukraine historically has had a very poor record in terms of sticking to its IMF agreements. This time has been different. That's why that vote on December 25th was so extremely important. And it sends a very important message to the international community, the international financial community, about the commitment of this government to stick to the path of reform. It's the reason that the exchange rate of the hryvnia has improved in recent weeks. It's the reason why yields for bonds have gone down. The market is saying Ukraine is turning around. You have the World Bank has just done its estimate for 2016 that the Ukraine economy will grow by at least 1%. Russia's economy will continue to shrink. These are all very positive indicators of the benefits that are coming to Ukraine from these very difficult and sometimes painful economic reforms that the government, that the Rada have been willing to push through. So I think that would be at the top of the list. I would also note very important changes in the energy sector. It's hugely important that you have disarmed the energy weapon that Gazprom, the Kremlin, has used against Ukraine in the past. Ukraine is achieving energy independence. That's demonstrated in your reduced reliance on Russia as a source of gas. It's demonstrated in the kind of statistics that the Prime Minister talked about in his remarks yesterday. More reverse flow from Europe, greater levels of economy in Ukraine's consumption of gas. So that would be another major accomplishment. Obviously, I would emphasize what's happened on the police side. We're very proud of our partnership with the Ministry of Interior, the Patrol Police, and the National Police. I think the Ukrainian people are justifiably proud of what they've accomplished there. But that's only one part of the larger process of rule of law and justice sector reform. There's the question of the Prosecutor General's office, there's the question of the judicial system. All of these go to the core of the principles that lie behind the revolution of dignity. Then the question of defense sector reform. Again, in 2015, Ukraine demonstrated that it will not be defeated militarily. Putin at one point was talking about, I can be in Kyiv in a couple of days. You have demonstrated that Novorossiya has failed. Now the challenge is to move ahead with building the kind of NATO standard military that President Poroshenko says he wants to achieve. We're prepared to be part of that. Our work with the special forces at Khmelnytskyi, our work training the Ukrainian army at Yavoriv, it's all about building a partnership, building the kind of Ukraine that the Ukrainian people say they want.
And about the fight with corruption,
Sure.
have we achieved something?
Well, obviously you've made progress because you have
But it's still
established the NABU, you have established an anti-corruption prosecutor. We are going to be hosting in Washington next week a very important delegation that includes the Deputy Prosecutor General, David Sakaralidze, and also the new anti-corruption prosecutor, Nazar Holoditsky. Two people who have very challenging jobs. They will be meeting with counterparts at our Department of Justice, our State Department, talking about how we can support them to be effective in the roles that they have. But I think what the Ukrainian people are looking for now is not just passing laws or establishing institutions, but really changing practices. I would note that's also what American business is looking for, because American business would like to do more here, but the biggest impediment to that at this point is this long-standing problem of corruption. These problems, the bad rating that Ukraine has on corruption issues, didn't happen just during the 3 years of Yanukovych. It goes back to a much longer history. It's going to take a while to work that through, but the important thing is to demonstrate progress, to begin holding people accountable, and to begin proving that the rules have changed.
Are there any American companies that are ready to enter the Ukrainian market?
Lots. There are, I hear from American companies all the time that are prepared to do more. Well, a couple of examples I can mention publicly. Cargill, very large agricultural company, would like to do more.
Last year you told me here that Cargill wants to enter the market and they still...
No, they were part of our investment summit back in July. The chief executive of Cargill came here with the Secretary of Commerce back in October. So they're actually putting their money where their mouth is. They're moving ahead in Odessa. Another important example is Westinghouse in terms of what they are prepared to do, what they are already doing in terms of working with Ukraine on nuclear fuel supply, and what they would also be prepared to do to work with Ukraine to raise productivity. There's a very good article in the Kyiv Post yesterday that reports on some of the specific proposals that Westinghouse has made for improving the productivity of your existing nuclear power reactors in order to get what is essentially free electricity. So Westinghouse is another good example. I was, way back in July, when I was in Uzhgorod, I visited an American company called Jabil, which produces electronics. They would like to do more. They would like to increase their hiring and increase their production in Ukraine. So there are lots of examples, and I think this is one reason 2016 promises to be a very exciting year, because you've now got your free trade agreement with Europe. A lot of people were skeptical that it would ever happen, but now it's real and it's permanent. And I think you're going to see companies that start to take a second look at Ukraine and say, wow, this isn't just a large market of 45 million people in the heart of Europe. It's also a very attractive platform for producing at a relatively low cost for the whole European market, now with free trade access to Europe. There are mechanical things that will have to get worked through on issues of agriculture and food. There are going to be standards issues, quotas that have to be managed through. But I think the Europeans are committed to that, and as I said, the American companies I talked to are very excited about the opportunities they see here. And there's one issue they always raise with me as the main breaking factor, and it's corruption.
But still we have aggression of Russia in the east of Ukraine.
Right.
And it seems like the Minsk agreements will still work in 2016 because
Yes.
they were not complete. And does the US plan, or are there any negotiations about strengthening the position of US in this negotiation process? Because you told me that there is a representative of US
Right.
in this group, but you told me on the Yes Forum, it was Sheila Gwaltney.
Ambassador Gwaltney, right.
Is she still participating?
No, Ambassador Gwaltney is our ambassador in Kyrgyzstan now, so we have another ambassador, Ambassador Ordway, who has come to Ukraine. Previously, U.S. ambassador in Kazakhstan, in Austria, very senior diplomat, whose only job here is to work with President Kuchma, to work with Mr. Demchenko, to work with the Foreign Ministry and Bankova to see the full implementation of the Minsk Agreement. We are 100% committed to standing with Ukraine and working with our French and German allies to see that Minsk is fully implemented. And by fully implemented, that means the removal of Russian troops and equipment, the restoration of Ukrainian control over the international border, a full and effective ceasefire, and the release of all hostages, to include high-profile political prisoners, people like Nadia Savchenko. So there is no ambiguity in our view on this. We recognize that the war is still grinding on. I was at Bankova this weekend, and I heard that there were 2 Ukrainians, 1 soldier, 1 policeman who were killed just on Saturday. So we recognize that the violence continues. But our goal is to hold President Putin to the commitments that he made as part of the Minsk Agreement, to see that the Donbass is fully restored as sovereign Ukrainian territory, and that elections are held on that territory, which meet the standards of the OSCE and identify legitimate leaders of the people in Donbass.
We have time for just 1 or 2 more.
One
One or two.
So about Minsk process, how do you think, are there any guarantees that Russia will implement these Minsk agreements in 2016? Because in 2015 there were progress, but still it's not enough to end the war.
Well, there are no guarantees, but we are committed to maintaining our pressure on Russia until they comply fully with their obligations. As you point out, the original Minsk ceasefire was signed in September 2014, and it took nearly a year before you had anything that looked like a real ceasefire. And even today, there is low-grade sniping that continues to take place. So we've been very clear, and fortunately our European allies have been clear as well, that the normalization of ties as far as the Minsk-related sanctions are concerned hinges on full implementation of all obligations. Ukraine needs to do its part as well, and that includes the Rada moving ahead with these constitutional amendments on decentralization, voting a law to conduct elections under Ukrainian law in the currently occupied territories. But we recognize that there is a victim and an aggressor here, and the root of the problem is the approach that Russia has taken beginning now nearly 2 years ago, as it began this this campaign of destabilization. So we're going to work with Ukraine. I will continue to remain engaged with political forces here so they have a clear sense of US policy, but also, as I said, to encourage the Rada to take the steps that Ukraine has committed to take, to include the constitutional reforms on decentralization, which frankly are important irregardless of Donbass. They're important to deepen Ukrainian democracy and are something that communities across this country have supported. And then also, as I said, to create the legal framework for a good OSCE standard election in Donbass. Not a fake election, like these fake referenda that Putin has caused to happen, but a real election that identifies legitimate leaders from Donbass. Frankly, like the elections that took place last year in 2015 in towns like Slavyansk and Mariupol, where you now have legitimately elected figures who can speak for those communities and who want them to be very much part of a united and European Ukraine.
Can I ask
Yeah, go
Sure,
for it.
last one.
about the Crimea?
Yeah.
How do you think, is it possible to set up the format that will discuss the returning of Crimea back, like the Minsk process?
Yeah, I mean, a couple thoughts on that. I mean, first of all, I want to be very clear, as Vice President Biden was when he came here last month. The United States has not and will not recognize the occupation and alleged annexation of Crimea. It's just not happening. Our policy is going to remain very clear on that. I think in terms of the diplomatic process, for now we want to focus on Donbass because that's where the killing has happened. 9,000 people dead as a result of a war that Russia manufactured. And we want to focus all our efforts on trying to end that violence and restore that part of Ukraine fully to Ukrainian sovereignty. Crimea is going to be a job for the longer term, but it's one where we've been very clear. Our sanctions on enterprises involved in Crimea are going to remain, and our legal position is going to remain unchanged. So I think my advice would be, let's deal with the most urgent crisis right now and think of Crimea as a longer term challenge.